The Montana sun filtered through the towering pines like liquid gold, painting the forest floor in patches of amber and shadow. 9-year-old Ethan Cole moved carefully through the underbrush, his small hands clutching a wicker basket his grandmother had given him that morning. She'd asked for wildflowers, the purple lupines and Indian paintbrush that grew wild in these woods, to brighten her kitchen table. Ethan loved these quiet walks. Here, among the ancient trees, he felt like an explorer in an untamed world. The forest spoke in whispers, the rustle of wind through needles, the distant call of a jay, the soft crunch of pine cones beneath his worn sneakers. His basket was nearly full when he heard something that didn't belong. A groan, low and pained, distinctly human. He froze, his heart suddenly hammering against his ribs. His mother's warnings echoed in his mind. Stay on the path, don't talk to strangers, come straight home. But something in that sound, something desperate and broken, pulled at him like an invisible thread. Ethan followed the sound deeper into the woods, pushing aside low-hanging branches until he stumbled into a small clearing. What he saw there would be seared into his memory forever. A man, massive and muscular, was chained to an old cedar tree. His leather vest, marked with patches and insignia Ethan didn't recognize, was torn and soaked with blood. His face was swollen, one eye nearly shut, and his breathing came in ragged gasps. The chains binding him to the tree were thick and cruel, biting into his wrists. The man's good eye cracked open and found Ethan standing there frozen in shock. "Kid," the man rasped, his voice like gravel grinding on stone. "Run!" But Ethan didn't run. He couldn't explain why. Not to himself, not later when adults asked. Maybe it was something he'd learned in church, or something his grandmother had taught him about treating others the way you'd want to be treated. Maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe he just saw a person who needed help, and his heart wouldn't let him turn away. "You're hurt," Ethan whispered, setting down his basket. "I said run, boy. The men who did this, they might come back." Ethan's hands trembled as he unscrewed the cap of his water bottle. "You need water." He approached slowly, the way he would a wounded animal, and lifted the bottle to the man's cracked lips. The biker drank greedily, water spilling down his bearded chin. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. The man coughed, wincing at the pain in his ribs. Logan Carter. People call me Blaze." "I'm Ethan. Why did someone hurt you?" Blaze's jaw tightened. "Long story, kid. Involves things a boy your age shouldn't know about." "I'm going to get help," Ethan declared, already backing away. "Wait." Blaze's voice stopped him. "You got a phone?" Ethan shook his head. His family couldn't afford one for him yet. "Then you need to go to town. Find Sheriff Morrison. Tell him Logan Carter's chained up in the Whispering Pines clearing. Can you remember that?" "I can remember," Ethan said solemnly, "but I'm not leaving you alone. Kid, you might get worse or thirsty again. I'll stay until you tell me to go for the sheriff." For the first time, something like a smile crossed Blaze's battered face. "You got more guts than sense, you know that?" Ethan sat down cross-legged a few feet away, positioning himself like a small sentinel. He told Blaze about his grandmother, about the flowers he'd been picking, about his favorite teacher at school. He talked to keep Blaze awake, the way he'd seen people do in movies when someone was hurt. And Blaze, despite his pain, listened. An hour passed, maybe 2. Ethan gave Blaze the last of his water and the granola bar from his pocket. He gathered soft moss to place against the worst of Blaze's wounds. And when the big man's breathing became shallow and his eye began to drift closed, Ethan sang, quietly, uncertainly, the songs his grandmother had taught him. Finally, when the afternoon shadows grew long, Ethan ran. He ran faster than he'd ever run in his life, his legs pumping, his lungs burning, his basket of flowers forgotten in the clearing. He burst into town like a small whirlwind, shouting for the sheriff, gasping out his story to anyone who would listen. The adults were skeptical at first. A chained biker in their woods? But Ethan's earnest face and the blood on his small hands convinced them. Sheriff Morrison gathered a team and followed the boy back into the forest. What they found confirmed Ethan's story. Logan Blaze Carter, a known member of the Iron Legion Riders Motorcycle Club, was indeed chained to a tree, barely conscious. The evidence around the clearing told a story of ambush and betrayal, a rival club settling old scores. As the paramedics worked to free Blaze and load him into an ambulance, his eyes found Ethan in the growing crowd. He raised one battered hand in a weak salute. Ethan saluted back, tears streaming down his dirt-smudged face. "That boy saved your life," Sheriff Morrison told Blaze. "Another few hours and you'd have been gone." Blaze's response was barely a whisper. "I know, and I don't forget my debts." 3 weeks passed. Ethan had returned to his normal life, school, homework, helping his grandmother in her garden. The town had buzzed with talk of the incident for a few days, then moved on to other. Doesn't always come in 6'4", 250-pound packages. Sometimes it comes in a 9-year-old kid who chooses kindness over fear. He placed a heavy hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You didn't see a scary biker that day. You saw a person who needed help. That's pure, kid. That's real. And in a world that's too quick to judge, too quick to look away, you looked closer. You stepped up." The street erupted in the roar of engines, a salute that shook windows and echoed off the mountains. Neighbors came out of their houses, mouths agape at the spectacle. Ethan's grandmother wiped tears from her eyes. "Speech!" someone shouted from the crowd, and others took up the call. Ethan looked at Blaze, who nodded encouragingly. The boy stepped to the edge of the porch, his small voice somehow cutting through the rumble. "I just did what I thought was right," he said simply. "My grandma says everybody deserves kindness. Everybody deserves help when they're hurting. I didn't know you were a biker. I just knew you needed me." He paused, looking at all those weathered faces, those men and women who'd lived hard lives and ridden harder roads. "Thank you for the bike. Thank you for coming. But you don't have to protect me. We can just be friends?" The laughter that followed was warm and genuine. Blaze stood, ruffling Ethan's hair. "Friends it is, little brother. Friends it is." The years that followed became legend in Redwood Valley. Ethan grew up with an extended family of bikers who took their promise seriously. When he turned 12, they taught him to ride on that blue dirt bike, patient instructors passing down skills and wisdom. When he was 13 and being bullied at school, 3 members happened to show up for career day, and the bullying mysteriously stopped. They came to his school plays, his baseball games, his grandmother's funeral when he was 15 and needed them most. They taught him mechanics, taught him honor, taught him that family isn't just blood, it's who shows up when you need them. And Ethan taught them something too. He reminded them every single day that the world isn't as dark as it sometimes seems, that compassion is strength, that choosing to help when you could walk away is the truest form of courage. When Ethan turned 18, Blaze gave him a full club patch, not because he'd ridden a certain number of miles or passed some trial, but because he'd earned it years ago in a clearing in the woods when a small boy chose kindness over fear. At the ceremony, surrounded by hundreds of brothers and sisters, Ethan said something that would become part of the club's code. "The smallest act of caring can echo forever. We ride for freedom, but we stop for those who need us. That's what makes us more than just bikers. That's what makes us family." The Iron Legion riders thundered their approval, engines roaring into the Montana sky. And somewhere in that sound was the echo of a 9-year-old boy's voice, offering water to a stranger, proving that sometimes the bravest hearts really do beat inside the smallest chests. This has been a Paths of Honor story, because true courage knows no age and real brotherhood knows no bounds.